Hello, and welcome to Terraria Completionism Part 11. I'm here in the Green Dungeon, right after Part 10, and we're going to go further east, to the very east end of the world, the East Coast. And I do apologize in advance for any, I guess there should be some sort of epilepsy warning. I mean, this place has a few gimmicks. First and foremost, it's entirely made of rainbow brick. This right here is the East Coast station. As you see, you have the train selectors for all the other stations, and right here you have trains for the deep subway, which we're going to get to next part. The other gimmicks are that there's no furniture. The only decorations are this rainbow wallpaper with rainbow torches and, you know, everything that's rainbow themed in the game, essentially, which isn't a lot of stuff. I just thought I'd put it all together. You even have like rainbow waterfalls and stuff. And the only way to get around is by using these Hoik elevators. Now, I'm aware of how Hoiks work. I want to point out how by the time I learned about them, I had already finished a lot of things in the game. So I sort of didn't bother integrating like any real Hoik things into my world. Because at that point I didn't really need them. Most things builds were decorative anyway. And I didn't need Hoiks for any of the wire builds because the wire builds, by the time that I got to making real wire builds, logic gates had come out and Hoiks were pretty much redundant. But I respect the people who use them, and I still, you know, see value in making mechanisms that way. As you can see, it's sort of, you know, based on the map as well, it's sort of a bit of a kind of a tiny sort of small manor fortress. I'm just going through all the elevators here. It's got a few little ins and out. It's sort of supposed to be like another dungeon, only a smaller dungeon. The idea is that this was used by like elites and the Precursors. You have the Precursor symbol here and down there as well. It's sitting all over the place. Pretty much used to indicate that this is another Precursor build. And as I showed in Part 10, the Precursors learned to make this rainbow brick material. They used it you know, to build sort of colorful housing at the East Coast, and of course, since the Earth's crust is hollow, a lot of the builds go underground, as is usually the case. We're just gonna go up right here. We're at the East Coast right here. See, these right here are supposed to be like buildings that are off in the distance. They're like high rises and whatnot. Basically, you have like a desert, and you have this tower right here at the beach. And the idea is that you have a whole bunch of, you know, you have a whole bunch of these structures that are sitting out at the beach, and some are actually over the water. It's basically like some sort of like social retreat that the Precursors had going on. Of course, I have to point out you have all of this like pixelation. I haven't pointed that out yet. That's essentially the way rainbow brick looks, and without going into too much detail, the idea is that rainbow brick has this sort of ethereal substance emanating from it. So that, like, if I had, like, a rainbow brick in my hand, within this world, if I had a rainbow brick in my hand, I would feel like this rainbow brick mist coming off of it, and the pixelation is supposed to represent that. That's essentially what it is, except it wouldn't even be so much of a mist as it would be, like, a real... Like a real... Like it would feel like like images of the brick were flashing around it. So it's not so much like a mist, but it is literally like sort of like a pixelation. Anyway, so that's the sort of visual representation there. There's also one more room I want to show up here. It's just something, it's just a little gimmick I added to make rainbow brick more interesting, because honestly, rainbow brick is like the least appealing substance in Terraria. It's very hard to build things that go well with it. This is meant to be an observation deck. I'm going to get to this upper section later, but it's meant to look over sort of and observe the ocean. And this is like, this background wall is meant to be water, and it's just like a glass ceiling that separates us from the ocean beyond. So before going up there, I'm going to go further east to the very edge of the world. So that's the idea with rainbow brick. Right here we have sandfall blocks because we're like underneath the sand, and right here we have this underwater fortress. If you turn the lights on, it's all wired up, so I kind of have to be a little careful. Now let's see what's... I turned the white one on. There we go. So that's sort of the main light. As you see, it's meant to be like a research facility. The background wall is offline blue gem spark, so it looks like it's water. Obviously, you have a bed here. The whole thing is sort of, it's decorated with corals and stuff like that. I got specimens sitting around and diving gear. The idea is that this is a new Civ thing. They would come here to like research the ocean flora and fauna and stuff like that. This definitely is not a precursor construction, although it is. I think it's fair to say that in lore, the precursors had something set up here that the new Civs just took advantage of. You see, right outside, I have like there's like these the plating here to show that there's like these columns that are holding up the fortress, and like coral sticking to the sides of it and stuff. So it all looks pretty good. I'm gonna turn on this light right here. So we turn on the sea floor. And the other thing is, obviously, this whole thing is also a light show, and I can turn on different colored lights down here. Basically, all the different gem sparks, just to have different little effects. My favorite one is the green one. It looks, I don't know, it has a really cool effect. And of course, with light shows, I have to be able to cycle through them, so I'm just going to wire this back up. The only annoying thing is I have to go through this process every time. And blue. And it goes like that. So that's pretty cool. So I'm just going to turn this off for a second and show off another little thing. And right here I have all the different water fountains in the game, and this came naturally to me as I was building this place. It makes perfect sense to be able to change the water color because you're immersed in water. So you have like the little control station where you could change the water color. That's supposed to be jungle, desert, that's snowland, snow biome. Then of course you have corruption, purple, halo pink, crimson red, and like blood red for that, which looks very scary. And yeah, this does stretch into the coral reef over there, but not too much. And of course, I could also combo them with the lights and that, and it actually looks pretty interesting. So this whole thing sort of this whole build ends up being just a nice little gimmicky little aesthetic piece where you can play with the lights and the colors of the water at once. So that's cool. And now I have one last thing to show off. I'm just going to go back to blue here. And we're going to swim. Let's get some diving gear, actually, just in case. So, I'm just going to get full... I'm just going to get my full air tank. There we go. So, obviously, I had to build a coral reef. I realized this recently. Building a coral reef was not easy. I had to make the ocean much wider for this. And of course I had to build the reef itself. And there's a lot of little nuances that went into something like this. For one, you might even notice that there's like a little bit of flashing going around. Like there's like right there you see that the background textures is not properly... It's like the game isn't certain what texture wants to show, so it's actually not perfect. I could argue that it's not actually finished from that, but I'm also not sure that wouldn't happen no matter how many different walls I slapped on this thing. Of course, I filled it all with gem spark lights, so it looks really cool. And this is all coral stone blocks. All of the stuff that you see, it's all coral stone blocks. It's all painted deep cyan or deep sky blue. And deep sky blue is the one that looks very sort of weird and green like this. Deep sky blue is the one that looks very marine, very much like an actual coral reef, which is what's really good. I don't know why sky blue paint looks like that, but it has a very good effect. Deep cyan looks good too. This is the deep cyan. Anything more sort of yellow looks too cartoony. The yellow paint looks cartoony. Originally I had a build where I had all the colors. I went from like one end of the reef was in like cyan all the way to like red. And suffice it to say, some of it looked, some of it looked decent and fairly exotic, but a lot of it just looked cartoony and ridiculous, like orange and yellow coral. I don't know, it didn't look very good. The background wall, just in case you're curious, that is all most of that is stone wall, painted deep sky blue, and you can actually see it up here. And a lot of that is also grass wall and living leaf wall. But also painted either deep cyan, deep sky blue, or sometimes there's even other colors. In fact, if I go up here, you notice that there's some pink in there and some white and stuff. Most of it is cyan and most of it is marine colored, but some of it is colored with some like purples and pinks and stuff like that. And you see coral all over the place, and that follows suit. And that's pretty much the idea. With the East Coast, it's just mostly natural. There's not too many structures out here. Just this massive natural build, coral reef, the water facility, and the rainbow brick Precursor mansion that's untouched since the Precursor era. But yeah, that's it, and I'll see you next time in part 12. Cheers.